No, thank you. Same here.
Hi, Cherise.
Yeah. Oh, I see 4 right now. The kids' Chromebooks help.
People in the waiting room. Not bad. This is ridiculous. Good morning, everyone. We have a couple people that are still trying to connect to audio. So once I see that everyone is connected, I'll get us started. Just so folks know, as you join our session, you are being recorded. So if you don't want to share your camera, feel free to turn it off. Okay, I see 2 people are having issues with audio. Folks, feel free to message me if you, for whatever reason, well, if you can't hear me, then it doesn't help to message me. Okay, let's just give them 1 more minute to try to get connected, and then we'll get started. I hope everyone was able to join on the opening ceremony. It was an excellent presentation. I think we picked the perfect person this year to do a virtual keynote. Okay, I think we're on 2 more. Let's see.
Chat is disabled, is that correct?
Okay, well, let's get started and hope that the audio issues for these last 2 people kind of gets sorted out. Thank you all for joining us today. Can I just get like a thumbs up that you guys can hear me and that you can see the video, or right now what you see in the screen says right to counsel. Is that what everyone sees? We're all good. Excellent. Thanks, Vera. Thanks, Joe. Love it. So we are a small group this morning, which means it's going to be pretty informal. We're not going to need to go into breakout rooms, which I really like in Zoom, because going back and forth to the breakout rooms is a, tech, sometimes wonky. But I'm excited to have Cherise Liu here from Public Justice Center. And for those of you who have done our Listen and Learn, she had done a Listen and Learn for us in June. Seems like a lifetime ago, kind of opening for Beyond the Boundaries, our eyes to this whole right to counsel issue in regards to evictions. And just for a lot of us, we just didn't really, we knew evictions were happening in Baltimore. We certainly didn't realize the magnitude, nor did we understand the racial disparities that were really taking place in these evictions. Since that time in June, there has been a really large momentum. What we know from COVID-19 is that it's really shed light on disparities that have always been with us. And so there's been a huge movement to shed light on evictions, the need to reform the system. And so what Sharita will be sharing with us today is a little bit on what you might have heard in June, and then kind of updating us on where we are with things. So we're really excited to have her here. I asked her to share some stories of things that she's seen. She is an attorney with Public Justice Center and primarily handles evictions and rent court in, I believe, Baltimore City. Or she'll correct me if I'm wrong. She has lots to share with us. She is also on the Baltimore Renters United Coalition, and was very instrumental in getting passage of the right to counsel in Baltimore City. So we're really excited to have her here with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Like our host said, I am Sharice Liu, and I'm an attorney with the Public Justice Center. We work on the human right to housing, and that is we are pushing for more stabilization with housing in Baltimore and statewide. So housing stability, affordable housing, and to obviously decrease evictions, especially here in Baltimore City, but statewide. Today, I'm gonna, like she said, I'm going to introduce what we were working on when I last was here and the result of that. And then COVID hit and what's happening there and what we're pushing for now and who it's impacting, how it's impacting people. And like she said, remind me that I have plenty of stories that I can share and how it impacts people on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for spending this time with me. And here we go. Right to counsel in Baltimore, addressing the civil rights issues of eviction.
Nothing, I can't hear a word they're saying.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Right to counsel in Baltimore, addressing the civil rights issues of evictions in
Yeah.
the wake of COVID-19. Can you hear me?
Unmute my audio with alternate A.
Joelle, can you hear us right now?
Where are you reading that? It came up there. I did.
Okay, we can hear you.
Muted before. I can't hear. Mute.
Give me 1 second, Sharice. I'll try to
Microphone.
send her a message.
Can. Oh, what microphone are you on?
I don't know.
Because this is not.
You.
This is always on.
You want me to continue?
Let's give her 1 second because
Okay.
I think she's toggling and untoggling that mute button.
Oh, nice.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'm not sure why she can't hear us because we hear her,
She might not have accepted the audio. You know what?
but we can hear her.
Yeah.
You're speaking, but can't hear.
Is it that I'm just not loud enough? Can someone else tell me if I'm not loud enough?
You're good.
You
Okay.
good.
I can hear you. Okay, let me see if she wants to. Okay, I'm gonna have her do that.
She's on mute now.
Okay, so why don't you keep going? I've just given her my number. If she wants to call me, I can try to walk her through it.
Okay, thank you. So even before COVID, Baltimore City itself had one of the highest rates of evictions nationwide, us in Prince George's County. We had a 5.3% eviction rate, one of the highest in the nation, with 140,000 eviction filings per year, with only 125,000 renter households. 70,000 eviction warrants were served, and 6,500 families were evicted. And these are all the legal evictions. These do not even include the evictions that we never see, that we, when the people are just locked out of their homes. Eviction is also a civil rights issue. In Baltimore, a Black household is a Black woman in particular is 296% more likely to be evicted than a white man, even in the same socioeconomic condition. 7.3% of all Black male heads of households and 5.4% of all Black female households were removed from their homes. These rates are roughly around 11% higher than of white-headed households. Now, this study was done by Dr. Tim Thomas. These stats that I'm gonna give you, at least in the earlier slides, are from Stout, Rhesus, and Ross. They were kind enough to do this for us, and Dr. Tim Thomas gave us the demographics background. The familiar butterfly in Baltimore, the black and white butterfly. The map shows that the highest risk of evictions occur in the most segregated neighborhoods to the west and in the gentrifying neighborhoods to the east. Why representation matters. So a study that showed that 80% of renters have a defense. Now, what this means is not just a technicality. There's no technicalities, unfortunately, in rent court. It means an affirmative defense to an eviction. So usually having to do with habitability issues. So no light, no hot water, no running water, severe mold. We have a severe mold problem in Baltimore City that hasn't been handled. Lack of lead license, lead exposure. They have paid the rent. Many times tenants have paid the rent or have paid way more than the landlord is claiming. But since it's so easy to get a judgment in rent court, no, he doesn't have to show any paperwork or anything like that. That money's owed. But only 8% out of that 80 ever successfully by themselves are able to raise a defense when they're in front of the judge. Landlords are represented 99% of the 96% of the time, and tenants are only represented 1% of the time. So that's about me and 8 other colleagues representing those 140,000 filings. It's not enough. We need help. There needs to be an intervention before it hits court. Like I said, there's many defenses. Landlords often aren't licensed to rent the property, meaning per se, the property is not habitable at the time to rent the property. The study showed that 92% of tenants with representation avoid disruptive displacement. Legal counsel holds landlords accountable to comply with new laws around COVID-19 and existing renter protections. So we were always in bad shape before COVID-19. As you saw those numbers, those were pre-COVID numbers. Then COVID hit. Many people lost their jobs. Some just lost hours. Some were sick. Some of the head of households died. But without any protections in place, people were left to fend for themselves. The city council eventually did unanimously pass the right to counsel in January. The bill codifies the right to counsel in all eviction matters. It calls for outreach and education to tenants about their rights. It partners with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Commission and dedicates funding to right to counsel. Like I said, COVID-19 hits. And on March 16th, the governor issues, after lobbying, after statistics were drawn, after communities, Baltimore Renters United, Maryland, people like yourselves, all called for the governor to issue some sort of order, some protection for tenants, or else there was going to be a mass eviction the very next month. So COVID pretty much hit us March 11th was a shutdown, I believe. And by March 16th, March 20th, people knew their April 1st rent could not be paid because many people in Maryland live paycheck to paycheck. The governor issues an affirmative defense. It was advertised as a moratorium, but it was not. Tenants could, using his order, under failure to pay rent, could argue that their loss of income was due to COVID. And if the judge ruled in their favor, they were not to be evicted, but it was not a moratorium. Hundreds of people have been evicted in Maryland. Hundreds of families have been evicted in Maryland since the March 16th order. In September, the CDC issued a temporary halt on evictions. Now, some jurisdictions out of Maryland, not Maryland, interpreted that eviction as it was intended, which was a moratorium on evictions. Maryland did not interpret it that way. Maryland interpreted it much like the governor's order, in which a tenant would still have to go before the judge and prove that their loss of income was due to COVID to stop the eviction. They have to fill out a declaration, give it to their landlord, and their landlord was supposed to then call off all filings and complaints. That didn't happen. There's still over 100,000 filings since COVID hit, and which goes right in line with the pre-COVID numbers, and left a giant loophole, which is the tenant holding over. With the tenant holding over, a landlord gives a notice to vacate without any reason, and the tenant has to leave within 30 to 60 days, 60 days usually for a month-to-month tenancy. After then, they become a tenant holding over. Well, the CDC and the affirmative defense by the governor left a giant loophole where the eviction can still happen. We are now fighting statewide to get rid of that, to close that gap, but it's a fight. Hundreds of Maryland families have been evicted. Over 200,000 are at risk of losing their homes, and there's $300 million in rent shortfall right now. Scott Reeses and Ross gave us that data, the same one that gave us the Baltimore City data. They're keeping a nationwide study on how many families or and how many households are at risk. And for us, it's over 200,000 in Maryland. And of course, there's that racial disparity there as well. This is the cost burden of families or households in Maryland by race. So white is 20.9, severely burdened is 21%, 18.5% for Asian families or households, 23.6 for severely. For Black households is 29.3% severely burdened by the cost of rent, 24.3 moderately burdened. And Hispanic, 25.8% moderately burdened, and 26.1% are severely burdened. And what that means is that they're paying over 30% of their income towards rent. And the severely is over 50% of their income goes towards rent. The Maryland Judiciary has provided us some data from July to November of 2020, 115,000 eviction cases were filed. So just in those were COVID months, with those laws in place, 115,000 eviction cases were filed in Maryland. Through October through November, 4,500 warrants were issued and over 1,100 evictions actually took place. A recent Johns Hopkins report has studied that, or has published that an average of 433,700 cases and over 10,000 deaths were due to the evictions evictions after the quote moratoriums. So even though they had the CDC eviction quote moratorium or the halt or suspension of evictions, and even though Maryland had the executive order, and many places still had the CDC moratorium on evictions, the fact that it was lifted in many states and jurisdictions, over 400,000 people were infected because of the evictions, directly due to evictions, and over 10,000 deaths can be attributed to those evictions. So what are we doing now? In Maryland, we have something called the Renters United Maryland, and this is a coalition of tenant organizers and organizations that push for tenants' rights and the human right to housing. Right now, we have something called the Housing Justice Package in the General Assembly right now. and it calls for emergency renter protections is one of them. It is a package of laws, a package of legislation. One of them is the emergency renter protection, and this is to close the loophole with the tenant holding over that we discussed earlier. That's mostly how people are still being evicted, is the tenant holding over. Not the failure to pay rent, but the tenant holding over and the breach of lease. Landlords have realized, even if they're getting the money, even if they're getting the rental assistance, what they're doing is choosing not to renew the lease. So if your lease would be up right now, I have someone, I'll give you a story. I have a woman who was gainfully employed. She was one of the people to, she contracted COVID early on because she was an essential worker. She was a nurse, a nursing assistant, and worked in the housing facility. And she contracted it about 2 weeks before anyone knew what it was. It caused her to have multiple strokes, leaving her blind. And no one could, they were treating symptom by symptom, but at the time it didn't have a name. It didn't have a name. No one knew what this was. It wasn't until March did someone, figure out what this was. Well, she was able to pay, the first couple of months of rent with her savings, but by the third or fourth month, the landlord had her in landlord-tenant court. We were able to assist her and keep her stable and connect her with rental assistance. That is taking a while to come down, but we were able to connect her to rental assistance. But now the landlord is using the tenant holding over process and choosing to not renew the lease. What does she do now? She is, for the moment, and hopefully this will not continue, she is receiving treatment, but she's lost most of her sight and is in physical therapy due to the stroke. What does she do now? The next legislation within the package is the eviction diversion and defense. And this one will have a huge impact on families. So this would slow down the eviction process. This would allow, first of all, a pre-filing notice that would force the landlord to provide the tenant with notice of any deficiencies. So if it's a rent issue, if it's something is broken in the home, a pet, anything, it gives the tenant notice, has to give the tenant notice and time to cure the issue. So so if the landlord is claiming a person owes $100 and the tenant says, no, I actually owe you $50 from last month, they have time to work that out before it just headed to court. It also allows time for a tenant to obtain counsel, and it would allow the two parties to enter into mediation rather than first going in front of a judge to get a judgment. Many times the issues can be settled. Many times they're small issues that sometimes the tenant doesn't even know what fees you put in the ledger. It's just a number they give you and the person is totally shocked at what it is. Sometimes it is a rent issue and the person can seek help. But once a judgment happens, they're days away from an eviction, as opposed to time to get the assistance that they need. Sometimes the person held their rent because of habitability issue. This gives the landlord time to fix the habitability issue, to actually, if the landlord needs services to fix that, but it gives the landlord notice and it gives the tenant notice. The court fee reform. The Attorney General is seeking to, and so the housing justice package includes a rent increase in court fees. Right now, I believe Maryland has the second to lowest court fee filing fee for landlords. It's $15 in compared to about $125 to $200 in other states. We're the second lowest, like I said. They're seeking to raise it to $125, which is about the average, a little less than the average of what every other state has. And that is to reduce the amount of filings. Right now, it costs the landlord nothing to file. It costs $15 and they get it back and more in a judgment, usually by default judgment. The tenant has to go to work. They don't have PTO like everyone else, like other people do. They've been back and forth to court because the landlord's a serial filer. They can go but so many times. This would reduce some of that and give each other more time. And obviously, we're looking for the right to counsel statewide. Right to counsel is a proven method of decreasing filings, decreasing evictions, and stabilizing housing. We're now looking to have a right to counsel statewide for eviction matters. And then there's emergency homeowner protections that will also help landlords and people in foreclosure. I've included a link in here, and you guys can, I will send this link, but it'll give you way more information about the efforts that Renters United Maryland and the General Assembly to pass these laws that will finally help stabilize tenants and housing in Maryland. So we're asking to expand and extend the executive order and its protections till April of 2022. So like I said, over 200,000 families are in imminent danger of losing their homes. It's going to take a while, even with the money that is coming down. And Maryland is supposed to get about 400 million, in renter assistance. But it's taking months to even get any of those checks out. A lot of landlords are denying the checks and the assistance and just pushing the tenant out. We need protections. Tenants need protections. If they're trying to evict people for arrears and the people are coming up with the money through rental assistance, the landlord should be obligated, or the money should go directly to the tenants to pay for this. We need more time. It's not going to be a quick fix. And we need the order to extend to at least April of 2022, which would be the next session. Prohibit landlords from terminating or not renewing leases unless they have a legitimate or good cause reason to do so. But loss of income is not a good cause, especially when there's rental assistance. And especially when at this time, many of my tenants, although eligible and approved for unemployment, many people have not received the unemployment money yet, even though they have been approved. So it's about 10 months of not receiving their unemployment money. This one's important. This one is the one that's we're having the most problems with. And so we will need everyone's help to push this forward. I don't think it's from lack of caring. I think it's a lack of understanding from the General Assembly that this is happening, that landlords are not renewing leases. We get this all the time, that landlords are just not renewing the leases so that the people just are evicted through that, even if they get the money, even if they're getting the rental assistance money. Ban late fees and interest charges and raising rent rates throughout the pandemic. Baltimore City did this. Baltimore City passed this through its COVID relief package, through the COVID Relief Act. Baltimore City stopped late fees and fees that increase the rent, or allowing a landlord to increase the rent during the state of emergency. We're asking that the state of Maryland does it for the rest of its tenants. Provide financial relief to landlords by creating a program to mandate matching state county budget funds for landlords to provide rent forgiveness. So we are asking for the landlords to get paid. We recognize that the landlords need for those that the money is actually owed to be paid. And we are asking for funds to make sure that happens. This is likely to happen, but it needs to be codified that landlords can get this, that there is that assistance. These are action alerts. I will send this around, but like I said, this will give you instructions on how to social media, emails, phone call, letting our General Assembly, particularly our senators and Speaker Adrian Jones, the things that are necessary to stabilize us again. Like I said, ensuring that landlords cannot just refuse to renew leases, that it's not that easy to just push someone out, to close that loophole with tenant holding over, to make sure to create a diversion program that allows space and time and alternatives to litigation to get landlords the money if it's owed, but also for landlords and tenants to settle on an issue instead of it being so adversarial. Mediation works in many other forms, and I think we all believe that it'll work here. And here's a video. I hope the link works. Give me 1 second. Hold. I had a video for you guys.
Link not working to the video.
No, the link's not working to the video. There's a wonderful video.
Do you want to just try to put it in? What link is it?
It is the one that it says video, right? In the.
Oh, in a video.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have, if you want to put the link in the chat, I can try opening it up on my end.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys. Give me 1 second. I know I have this. Give me a second. I
Still going. Thanks for everyone's patience today. It's
Thank
been
you.
a weird
I'm
morning.
sorry, guys. It's been,
Oh,
I'm
geez,
so
this
sorry.
is nothing so far compared to what I've been getting phone calls on.
There is a great video I wanted you guys to see, which basically, I'll tell you what it does. It shows that, it demonstrates that this recovery is like a ladder. And if you take away one step in the ladder, it hurts the rest of it. So tenants and landlords need the time to recover. So that means we need the diversion program. We need to reduce eviction, both for public health reasons. Like we said, many people contracted COVID simply from being evicted. And even for public health reasons, we need to slow down evictions. We need to stop disruptive displacements. With that, we need to close the loop on tenant holding over. It shouldn't be that easy for people to lose their homes from month to month or from year to year. These are families, these are children. Maryland and our counties use a lot of money filling that gap because people lose their homes. And on a personal level, on the person-to-person and family-to-family level, it only increases poverty. It only continues homelessness and goes further down to joblessness. Children miss school. And it just in Baltimore, it cost over $35 million. Just in the little city of Baltimore, the state and the county combined end up spending over $35 million. And that's the amount that we found in just certain categories. So health, transportation for homeless students, pretty much that's where we got that number. It didn't even count for just shelter costs and how much we spend to help those students catch up, or how much we spend relocating someone. We didn't even have the numbers for those. So just those couple of categories equals over $35 million. So We are asking for action. We are asking in one, it's the one that says share your story right here. If you want to pass it on to people who want to share their story or why they support renters' rights and the human right to housing and the justice package, the housing justice package, you can create a video by just linking, by clicking that link. I'm going to send this PowerPoint to everyone, but by clicking that link, you'll be able to create your own video and send it to the legislatures. I can send you guys an email with things that if you would like a stock email. But again, we're asking for everyone's help. And I'm open to questions, if any. I'm sorry I didn't have the video for you, but I can send the video through, I'll find the video and send it to you through an email if Mary would send it to all of you. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. By the way, thank you for the work you do. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I work in the community and I usually go see my clients in their homes. The sad part of it, and I'm just listening to all of this, it just blows my mind. I'm not surprised, just from my own little observation, but it just blows my mind that landlords have such powers over, and for them to be paying $15 in court. I work more in Baltimore City, and 90% of my clients are under that poverty threshold. I would tell you the houses they live in that they're paying like $1,200. It's so deplorable. And I'm sitting here and saying, who did this? And then you'll be surprised things are breaking. Landlords are not fixing nothing. They feel so powerless. And I'm like, well, how do you ever get it? Just, I mean, for a lack of a better understanding of how it got there, it's more like, and then the sad part is most of them cannot re-rent like that because maybe they have a bad history, credit history, so they are tied down with this landlord who just treats them however he or she wants. And so those things just, I don't even know how to go with it, because it just sometimes how do you help them besides overwhelming the social justice system, the DSS and all of the other places that help, but they will only help for 1 or 2 months, right? And like you rightly said, with all of these public health issues, the financial stress on the system, taxpayers who think your job will be easy passing this legislation, right? Because it bounces back to all of us. It affects us one way or the other.
That's right.
You know, so yeah, I'm glad that you're doing this and you send out the PowerPoint. However, I can help pass it on to colleagues, however, so it's just an easy thing to me. It's looking at it for it to pass, but I guess not. Yeah.
So what you just said touched on well, thank you. And thank you for all the work that you do. I know what you do, and that's not easy. So I'll walk you through the line of everything you just said and how it happens. So if I was your landlord, I can file at any time. There's no standard for it. There's no, I don't have to attach proof of you owing the rent or not owing the rent. I can file at any time, and for $15, and I'll get it back when I get the judgment. I get that money back and more. I don't really pay for this thing. We pay and the tenant pays. And so you file. And it's about, I would say the longest about 2 minutes with a pro se tenant, not represented. As you see, only 1% are represented. And their standard for meeting the burden is so much higher. So they have to have receipts, although they don't have a ledger, because a ledger is controlled by the landlord. For the habitability issues, for the conditions that you talked about. Well, if the tenant complains, even if the landlord is even if some justice is found where the landlord, where the judge or the court says, okay, you withhold 2 months rent until he fixes this or she fixes this, The landlord just has to wait it out to the end of your lease and not renew it. That's your punishment. So what do you do? What do you do? Do you mention that you don't have heat, that there's so much mold in your property that you have to have your windows open 24/7, 365 days out of the year? Do you, there's elderly communities that that I speak to right now who are without heat. They are paying their rent, but they are without heat. What do they do? If the landlord decides not to renew their lease, where do they go? In a pandemic, do they go house to house and look for a new place to live? No. So many, this loophole of landlords being able to not renew leases without any cause leaves so many people vulnerable. And because of the serial filings, it's not even their bad credit. It's because even if they win every single time they go to court, let's say a tenant wins every single time they go to court because they don't owe money, because they are in the right, the filings themselves are held against tenants when they try to look for another property, which usually means that the new landlord will make you pay double deposit or not accept you at all because you were one of the people that fought back or complained. These are giant loopholes that we all end up paying for, including and especially the families. So does any other questions?
Yes, I have one. Actually two. Any chance do you have the bill number for the house justice package that you was talking about?
So
we
the
can
housing justice
call,
package, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. The housing justice
call
package
the-
is a few pieces of legislation, and I can send, it's in this PowerPoint, and I can send you which ones are which, and I'll be happy to do that.
Yes. Okay, second one, we received a work in St. Gabriel Church in Woodlawn and Winstonville, and we received a lot of call for the Latin community, especially because they receive from the landlord on eviction notice, and because they don't speak language, and a lot of them don't have papers.
Should you be in
They
charge
receive
of
all
that?
this,
Yeah, she-
you have to leave now, if
She
not,
might-
I
she might
call
not have
the
to.
immigration. So how
Okay.
we can deal with them when they call
Okay.
with the situation?
I can also send you over, CASA is part of Renters United Maryland. And they are a leader in this. They can call CASA of Maryland and they will definitely help them. If you need the number, I can give you the number. The number might be here in this, I can send you the number, but also at rentersunitedmaryland.org will connect you to all the organizations that help. And we'll even let you know, some of them are more county specific, like Public Justice Center. We represent tenants in Baltimore City, but if they call us as well, we will get them to who they need to get to. And
Can
yes,
we-
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, are you done with your slide presentation, and then we can
Yes,
let everyone kind of see each other?
yes,
they
I'm
want-
sorry.
No, you're fine, you're fine. I didn't know if you wanted to go back and forth with it.
How do I not share anymore?
Oh, I hate that part of it. So you go at the very top of your screen and click the red button that says end share.
There we go.
Yeah, I don't like screen sharing very much.
Hi, everyone.
So yeah, now you can see her face and we can ask some questions as if we were in person.
So, and what you just touched on is very true. So we have that in all the counties where landlords, I've had a few tenants lately where landlords are, if the tenant goes to court or if they don't give them the amount of money that they want, not even what is owed, but what they want, they are claiming that they are going to call immigration on them. Some landlords are accepting, one woman, she's actually in the video, they accepted the rental assistance, over $4,000 in the rental assistance, And the landlord decided to use that money towards fake fees and then turn right back around to the tenant and say, you still owe rent. The woman was an essential worker. And these loopholes are allowing people to just remain completely vulnerable, not to mention the physical and mental health that they go through and strain that they go through, but just not knowing where them and their children are going to lay their head the next day, even when paying rent. That's just it. Even when paying rent, you're not secure here. Did you complain about that week that you guys didn't have hot water? Okay, well, it is likely your lease won't be renewed. Maybe he fixed it, but your lease is not going to be renewed. Were you $10 less in 1 month? Okay, well, that $10 may end up being $100 when you add the late fee, the court fee, the $15 filing fee, the $30 filing fee, that now sheriff $80, the $50 for the sheriff fee. That $10 ends up being $100. Does your landlord give you receipts? Many landlords, particularly in Baltimore City, do not take receipts. They don't tell you that when you lease. They don't give receipts. They just don't. Like if you go to 7-Eleven and you buy a stick of gum, you get receipt. You don't get receipts. So at any time you want to bring me to failure to pay rent, all I can tell you is that I paid. That's all I can do is say, I have paid. And if you don't use checking, which many of them do not take checks, if you don't use some sort of form, even money orders, the court won't use the receipt thing from the money order. They always say this could have gone to anybody. It could be for the exact amount that's rent, but it could have gone to anybody. We need account.
On the same token, why would the court not hold the landlord for not issuing receipt for rents paid? That blows my mind, because don't they see that as a means of coercion? That's a means of control. If I don't give you receipt, you don't have proof to say I gave you the money. And granted, like I say, the population I work with, most of them are really in that level of poverty. They don't even own a bank account, some of them. So they can't even, it's always going to be cash money stuff. And that to me, and when we talk about private landlords, I don't know what your research is, but my experience with this client has been more of private landlords, because of course apartments probably have more, stuff on them, but private landlords are just, it's like, oh my God, how bad can it be? The houses are, first of all, so expensive. If I compare with the county, their bills, their electricity bills, their water, I was like, what are you using in this house?
It's because of the conditions, right? So if your house has holes and gaps in the windows and in the doors, you're trying to keep your temperature at 70 degrees is not the same as when your house is, or your property is secured, right? So their BG&Es bills are often way higher than for most of us. As far as the rent, everyone assumes because people are living in these bad conditions that the rent must be, $400, $500. Not that there's any amount that you should be paying for uninhabitable conditions, but no,
it's so expensive.
I never see anything lower than $1,100, $1,200. And
right.
I definitely see things as high as $2,300, $2,500. You add that to the cost of the fake fees they put on there, on top of the increased BG&E because the home is not secure, the mold, so you miss work sometimes because you get sick more often than I get sick because your walls have mold on them. In a pandemic, that attacks your respiratory system. There's lots of things connected to this housing crisis that we have. And unfortunately, it is the PJC, the Human Right to Housing, Baltimore Renters United Maryland, and other workers, public health workers, that are now cognizant of the fact that health, economic health, physical health is connected to housing stability. And we're hoping that the legislatures finally see that as well.
So one thing I want to ask the group here is, as Catholics, as, Christians and people coming for this purpose, for the Archdiocese Convocation coming from, parishes, what do you think you can do or what could be done within your parish to kind of help drive momentum? If you think about it, the timing of this is excellent. We're knee deep in statewide advocacy efforts. And so one question I have for the group is kind of ways you think you could help. Whenever we have our coalition meetings, it's all about how do we get more people on? How do we get the word out? How do we really put pressure on our legislators? And so what do you guys see as some ways to do that?
I see the possibility, if I can, of notifying the members of the parish what's going on in Annapolis here, asking them to contact their local delegates, either in writing, by phone. The more the delegates hear from their constituents, the more likely they are to do the right thing. They don't always, but at least you can point them in that right direction. And I do have a question. You were talking about where the landlord can just say, I'm not going to renew your lease. Is there any way that can be fought? Say if the person paying the rent all the time?
No, that's what we're asking for, the just cause evictions. That's what we're looking for with this non-renewal, this prohibition from that in the justice package, in the housing justice package. No, there's not really, if your lease ends, they can just non-renew.
I had never heard of that until just this week when a client called me and said that that's what's happening to her. And she's going to try and talk to the landlord, but I doubt she's going to have much success. The other question I do have, I'm sorry, you're talking about trying to raise, our filing fee is so low, $15. The client pays it back or the tenant pays it back. If we raise it to 100 or whatever it's going to be, hoping to get it raised to, the client is still going to end up paying that back in the long run. And so
Good question, perfect question, because I forgot to include that. So in the legislation, the AG is trying to make sure that there's no pass through to the tenant. That is what's getting the most pushback. That and the non-renewal is what's getting the most pushback from the landlord lobbying, for obvious reasons. Like I said, right now it's easy, right? It's easy to serial file. It's easy there's no risk involved. You're not punished even if it's found in the tenant's favor in rent court. There's no punishment for serial filing. There's no punishment for not telling the truth and claiming someone owed something they didn't. There's nothing. All that happens is you missed a day of work as the tenant, and the landlord, this is his job. So he didn't miss a day of work. You did. And trying to find an attorney. So no, there is not much of a defense when the landlord decides not to renew the lease. And like you said, it would pass down to the tenant without a provision within the legislation. And that's where we need the most help. I have a feeling that one of the senators said this, or one of the delegates said this actually in another forum. He said that he thinks that all of these will pass, but they may be watered down to the point where they don't have the effect that they need. So the issue you just brought up, the issue of the non-renewal, or issuing or tenant holding overs. Those are the things that will still go through, that will still be in place, so the legislation won't have the impact that they're supposed to. And that's where we need everyone's help, where they say, no, these things stay, these provisions stay, because they are the stabilizing force.
I think that's where we can really have a huge impact, of going to your neighbors, your friends, and for us going back to our parishes and saying, I'll tell you, the Maryland Catholic Conference has supported these bills, has supported the housing justice package. It hasn't been their main focus the way it is for Beyond the Boundaries, but, saying if we're going to support these bills, we need to make sure they pass. And how do we get our parishioners to come out in full force and send those action alerts and send those emails. Because it's just like Sharice was saying, I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, Sharice, there is a bill related to increasing the fees, but it specifically removes that language where it can be passed on to tenants, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what the AG is the AG is pushing to make sure it does not, and
Right.
we are pushing that it does not pass on. That's the part where the legislature is having the most
Right.
problems,
And
right?
so we need all the people we can get to email and say, it's funny. It's kind of like confusing what you're going to say, but it's more like, don't pass this bill that allows it to pass through to the tenants, and making sure that however it looks, we just want to preserve these rights for our tenants and making sure that our legislators know, we know what they're trying to do, and we're gonna hold their feet to the fire.
That's right. That's right. And to pass the housing justice package the way the housing advocates drafted it.
Yeah.
Including the AG. The AG does see the problem with this. He sees how easy it is. He sees how easy serial filing is. It is the most active court, the landlord tenant court. We are on one docket is 300 cases go by like this. 300 cases just go by just like that. 300, just like that. So in about a day, 900. So in about a day, 900. Think about how many people that, even if you cut that down to half of them, let's say half of them get dismissed. First of all, now there's still a record of a filing on you, right? And the other half, how many families is that? And most of them are never represented, as you know, 99% are never represented in Baltimore and everywhere else, to be honest, but they're not represented. And some of them, they gave up on even showing up, right? There's no point in showing up. And those who do go before the judge, by themselves, there's nothing, they don't know what to assert. They don't know what to say. All they say is, but I have mold. Well, that's rent escrow, so go. It's not true, but there's no lawyer to assert their rights.
So there's no public defendants for this, as you have public defendants?
There's no, there before actually a couple of months, last month or so, there was no right to counsel in Baltimore, and there is no right to counsel for civil matters and for eviction matters in Maryland. That's what we're pushing for, a right to counsel. There are some nonprofit legal service providers, like I said, about me and about eight more other attorneys who do this. And our job, before COVID, was to be there in the courthouse and have minutes to help someone. Minutes. I meet you right now, and in 10 minutes, you and me are going to be in front of the court, and I'm trying to gather any papers you brought, anything you brought, to then fight this. And the reason it's that fast is because I saw you got your complaint maybe 3 to 5 days before the day you're in court. So it's stacked against you. It's stacked heavily against you as the renter. And this is just, you have the numbers in the PowerPoint, but let me tell you, as just someone who practices in it, it's all moms in there. It's mostly Black women in there, mothers, working people.
So talking about the question about how we help with our churches, I was going to ask us an organization called Bill. I don't know if they are part of your Bill. Okay, I think it's in maybe it's West Baltimore where my church is. I know my church is part of it, St. Cecilia. It's more of a multi, like what do you call it? It's a non-denominational. You have other churches in the area with that organization. I think this is one thing they should know about, because that's one of their goals. Bill, I think they call it Bill. I'll probably let my pastor know, know about it. But yeah, it's one thing that I know for a fact they will probably push for, because this is most times they raise money to help people in the community who are facing eviction and stuff like that. So this should be something they will definitely want to be part of. So yeah, once you send out that PowerPoint, is something that I can reach out. I know my church is part of that group because they fall in that West Baltimore, West Baltimore location of it. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, and I'll wrap up, but I'll tell you that one of the issues that I see, and COVID is a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. Please do not get me wrong, but it did open up number one, it showed how it exacerbated all the issues, right? All the economic, racial disparities in Maryland, in Baltimore, and nationwide. But what it also did was it opened up an opportunity for places like me, like where I work, and you, to have outreach and for people to start learning a little bit more. And so one of the biggest problems that I see is not that no one cares or that they don't know this is happening. If you didn't do your job where you were going into people's homes and see and know this person, you just don't know, right? You don't know. But now is the time where we can start highlighting that, for instance, I live in Baltimore City. I can't tell you how many of the neighborhoods that I'm in, that I live next to, that they're harmed simply because one landlord doesn't take care of his property. It hurts all the people next to him, right? And we look at all these solutions, or what is happening because of this, it's happening good. No, it's happening because we don't have a standard or regulations on how we keep property, how we use this property. So, thank you for being willing to reach out. And I think that's really what it's going to take, is that people have a certain basic knowledge of what's happening in housing to our neighbors, to our friends, to our families, to our parishioners, to our fellow church members, to your child's friend sitting there in school with him may be homeless or this close to it. So so thank you for that.
So one thing I would challenge everyone, we kind of identified how we can go back to our faith communities and try to kind of rally. That's sometimes a challenge. Another thing that could be done is if everybody identifies one organization that maybe wouldn't or isn't on the list of, isn't Bridge, isn't CASA, Maryland Legal Aid, Public Justice Center, an organization that you know of in your community where you could go to them and say, are you interested in signing on to this legislation? Because what we're seeing is the legislators are very responsive to public opinion, and getting the more people we have showing that this is important, then the better it'll be, and kind of building that coalition. But it doesn't necessarily have to be in this political sense. I mean, are there other ways that anyone could think of supporting this kind of movement to reducing the amount of evictions, addressing the disparity in them? Is there anything else besides maybe not exactly in the legislative sense?
I'm really grateful that you're bringing this issue today. I'm a Benedictine sister. Of course, we hear it on the news all the time, and about evictions, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, we do pray, morning and evening for those who are homeless, without shelter, without food, clothing. We try to give what we can. But I would myself, and this eye opener and choosing this issue today to become more aware, I myself will look to get more involved.
That's excellent. I think that's just a great start, as we all just kind of say, like I said, for Beyond the Boundaries, for our steering committee, it really opened our eyes to say, wow, this is a lot going on that's kind of been brushed under the rug. Sharice, when you say that there's 900 eviction proceedings, I just sit there and I think, oh, Wow. That's just crazy.
Well, think about
Um,
the down to how fast would your proceeding be, right? How fast would your hearing be if he's seeing, if what in this one docket, 300 other cases are being heard? How fast, how much talking do you think, how much do you get to really say?
Jeez Louise, that's just crazy. I mean, that's a lot.
And
And
one
that's
thing
where,
Go
I
on.
was just going to say, that's where I think the right to counsel is. I think it's all important, but for me, in my kind of tunnel vision, it's if we let these landlords know that these tenants can go get legal advice and that they have a right to it, that maybe these landlords will kind of realize, ooh, I actually have to kind of follow the law now.
Yeah, yes, and that's what we're hoping, and that's what we see in so few. There's I think we're the seventh. Baltimore City was the seventh to adopt the right to counsel, and in New York was the first. And they found that something along the line of 84% in just the they started off with just zip codes. They're going to do it, citywide, but they started off with the most at-risk zip codes. They found that 84% a year later, tenants were not disruptively displaced. They were not evicted.
Incredible.
And that's just the beginning of the right to counsel. And for us, we think that 92% of those filings, of those evictions would go down. Think about what that could do for Baltimore City, its stability.
I was also going to say, with the landlords, we are talking about a problem, and there's always two sides to it. I was going to think about it. How do we engage them? Because, as a Christian community that we are in this social convocation, you reach out to the other side and say, hey, let's listen to you too. How do we make you know that you're in partners with your tenant? You want people to treat you the way you want them to treat. You want to treat others the way you want them to treat you. If your tenants are not there, you're not in business, right? So if you give me almost like looking like an abandoned house to pay you rent for something that is not equivalent to what I'm paying for, how do you feel? It's just that one communication where you have people, like how they have town hall meetings and people are sharing. I feel like, I know there are good landlords out there. And I know, of course, there are some really, really bad ones out there. But maybe they too have their own organization where they could start talking sense into the people who form that organization or who make out that particular group.
They do. They have a very powerful lobby. And they do have organizations, and there are really good landlords. But that's not who you see, right? That's not, because they're not they're not serial filers. They're not, so that's not who you see. That's just not who you see. You should reach out to landlords. You should talk about like I said, I think from every level, I've reached out to landlords in my neighborhood because you were hurting my neighborhood. You weren't just hurting your tenant, you were hurting the neighborhood. Your house is next to someone else's house and you're not taking care of your house. And so it is also about outreach, but it's also a chosen business, right? We don't have restaurants where they get to choose whether or not they feed you food that meets a certain standard. I don't care if it's a $5 burger or a $20 burger. It has to actually be beef or whatever meat it's supposed to be, and it's not supposed to have anything dangerous in it. The same should be very true for how you're in your house all the time. It's your comfort. It's where you lay your head. There's on the book standards, but there's no enforceability. And so that needs to be carried out, and there used to be, before my time, I believe there used to be a landlord school. It was called like landlord class. They don't have it anymore, but even something like that would help, because a lot of people go into landlord tenant and become a landlord without knowing it much. And it shows, and they shouldn't. You shouldn't. I shouldn't be a mechanic. It's not good for anybody. And some people, if you can't meet these certain standards, then maybe being a landlord is not for you. Or maybe you can meet these standards and you know about the standards and you're educated on the standards. But there needs to be some level of accountability.
The other thing I'll just add, and I'm going to end this in like 2 minutes so everybody has a decent break if you intend to go to our virtual social ministry fair. But the other thing I'll kind of add on is if doing kind of the political side of things is not your preference, there are groups that do a lot of tenant organizing and tenant advocacy. The one that I'm a part of is, and I know Father Ty is the COVID emergency response group, and they do just kind of like, they're one of the organizations in there, Housing Our Neighbors. One of their big focus, in addition to homeless services and relief, is informing tenants of their right. And so they create flyers and they paste them all over in places where evictions tend to happen. And so if that's something that is more your style, boots on the grounds, we need everybody playing their part. And so if that's kind of what you think is something you would want to do, there are organizations that do that, where, it's a part of the political process because we're informing people of their rights, but it's a way to kind of, we all have to serve in different ways. And so there are groups that do that. So feel free to reach back to me. I know Charisse knows some of them. She's on the same calls I'm on, and everyone kind of has their role. And so it's wherever you feel that you can make the biggest difference. There's just as much value in putting a poster up and letting tenants know their rights as there is in meeting with a senator and a delegate to talk about changing the law. They both have to happen. So I think it's all part of how do we effectuate change here. And I think part of the one thing that they're going to be doing is, and that's where CASA is trying to work on, is getting more of these tenants to reach out to their legislators and say, this is an issue for me.
And I'll wrap up. I just want to say that one way I found during COVID, and which I think is really effective, if you're simply your community association, really. Community associations have the hardest, thankless job, and they fight so many different issues. But they don't know this part. I didn't know that my neighborhood didn't know this part. So we're fighting over dumping, we're fighting over vacant homes. And they didn't know that some of those homes aren't vacant. They look terrible, someone lives in them. And so, even informing your community association, because it is about their neighbor, it's about the people around them and their school around them and their church around them. That in itself is really powerful and helpful. And they themselves have a lot of power. So, any way I can help, please let me know.
No matter where you live, I don't care if it's center city, in the suburbs, wherever, there are absentee landlords who don't care, who use it as a write-off on their taxes. And there are the people, you are the victims of them.
Yep.
If they were really conscientious, they would take care of the problems. I was a landlady for many years in an apartment building, a guest house. And when I tell you, as soon as they would call with a problem, I was there, whether it was a leak, toilet problem, whatever it was, that you have to be there.
Yep.
Or if you don't live in the area, you need to delegate it to somebody who can be present to take care of these needs.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. We do have our, and thank you so much, Charisse, for this amazing presentation. It's always fantastic, and I'm excited for the people who join us in the afternoon because it'll generate new ideas and new conversation. So thank you to everyone who joined us. We are going to be having our virtual social ministry fair after this. You just go back to the website and click that link. In the chat, I've put the evaluation link. That's also on the website. And there's a chance for you to give feedback on this session here today. But again, Charisse, thank you so much for the amazing work that you're doing every day, day in and day out. I really appreciate you and everything that you do. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for
Thank
listening
you.
to me.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
And Charisse, I'll just tell you, it's the same link for this afternoon.
Okay. I'll see you then.
All right, bye.